A woman will never look at you and say, "I'm attracted to you, come closer." That's not how it works. What she will do instead is something far more subtle. And if you don't understand it, you'll miss it every single time. Not because she didn't show interest, but because you didn't recognize the language she was speaking. And here's the part that most men don't realize. The strongest signals of attraction don't come from her words. They come from her hands, from what she touches, how she touches it, and when she does it around you. Because when a woman is attracted to you, her body starts reacting before she even has time to think about it. Her nervous system shifts, her energy changes, and that internal tension needs somewhere to go. And without even realizing it, she starts expressing it physically, through touch. Now this is where most men completely fail. They're listening to what she says. They're trying to read her tone. They're waiting for something obvious. Meanwhile, her body has already told them everything they needed to know, and they missed it. And it happens all the time. A woman will be sitting right in front of you, showing clear signs of attraction through her behavior, and you'll walk away thinking she was just being friendly. Not because the signs weren't there, but because no one ever taught you how to read them. That's the real problem. It's not that women are hard to understand. It's that you were never taught the language. Because if you were, you would start noticing patterns immediately. You would see that certain behaviors don't happen randomly. They show up at specific moments, around specific men, and they always follow the same underlying psychology. This isn't guesswork. This is behavioral, and it's backed by something most people ignore: nonverbal communication. Studies have shown that the majority of emotional communication between two people happens without a single word being spoken. That means while you're focused on what she's saying, the real conversation is happening somewhere else entirely. In her gestures, in her movements, in what she chooses to touch when she's around you. And once you understand that, everything changes. Because you stop waiting for confirmation. You stop second-guessing every interaction. You stop missing the moment. Instead, you start seeing exactly what's happening in real time. You begin to recognize when she's just comfortable and when something deeper is going on. And in this video, I'm going to break that down for you step by step. Not based on opinions, not based on random advice, but based on real patterns you can actually observe. You're going to learn the specific things a woman touches when she's attracted to you, what each one actually means, and the one signal most men completely misread. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now that you understand that attraction often shows up through touch rather than words, the next thing you need to realize is why so many men completely miss these signals in the first place. It's not because the signs aren't there, and it's not because women are trying to hide everything perfectly. The real issue is that most men have been conditioned to focus on the wrong part of the interaction. From early on, men are taught to listen carefully to what a woman says and to use her words as the main indicator of interest. If she sounds engaged, that's taken as a good sign. If she sounds distant or neutral, it's assumed she's not interested. But this way of reading attraction is fundamentally flawed because words are the most controlled part of communication. A woman can choose what she says, adjust her tone, and manage her responses based on the situation. What she cannot fully control is how her body reacts in real time. This is where nonverbal communication becomes far more important than most people realize. Research has shown that a large percentage of emotional communication happens without a single word being spoken. That means while you're focused on her sentences, the real conversation is happening through her gestures, her posture, and most importantly, her hands. When a woman feels attracted to you, her internal state changes before she consciously decides what to say about it. There's a shift in her nervous system that creates a kind of physical energy, and that energy needs an outlet. It doesn't stay contained in her thoughts. It shows up through small, repetitive actions, especially through touch. She may start playing with her hair, touching her neck, adjusting something she's wearing, or interacting with objects around her in a way that feels slightly different from normal behavior. The problem is that most men either overlook these behaviors entirely or dismiss them as random habits. They assume that she would act the same way around anyone, or they second-guess what they're seeing because it doesn't match the clear, verbal confirmation they're expecting. As a result, they miss the pattern that's actually forming in front of them. And that's the key word here, pattern. None of these signals should be interpreted in isolation. What matters is consistency. When certain behaviors repeat themselves, specifically when she's interacting with you, that's when they start to carry meaning. That's when you can begin to understand that her actions are reflecting something she hasn't said yet. Once you start shifting your focus away from just listening and toward observing, everything becomes easier to read. You begin to notice differences in how she behaves with you compared to others. You start to see that her hands are not just moving randomly, but responding to how she feels in your presence. And the first place this becomes very obvious is in one of the most common signals that almost every man has seen before, but very few actually understand. The first signal most men notice, but almost always misunderstand, is when a woman starts touching her hair. On the surface, it looks obvious, almost cliché. You've probably heard before that when a woman plays with her hair, it means she's attracted to you. And because it sounds so simple, most men either overreact to it or completely dismiss it. The truth sits somewhere in between. Hair touching is only meaningful when you understand why it's happening and how it's happening in that specific moment. Not every movement toward her hair is a signal of attraction. Sometimes she's just adjusting it because it's in her face or fixing it out of habit. But when the behavior becomes repeated, slightly exaggerated or timed specifically around her interaction with you, that's when it starts to carry real meaning. What's actually happening here is neurological. When a woman feels attraction, her brain releases chemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine. These are the same chemicals associated with excitement and heightened emotional awareness. One of the side effects of that internal shift is increased nervous energy, especially in the hands. That energy needs somewhere to go, and one of the most accessible outlets is her hair. That's why the movement often looks natural, but slightly more frequent than usual. She might twist a strand of hair around her finger while listening to you. She might sweep it to one side repeatedly, even when it doesn't need to be moved. In some cases, she might pull it back or over her shoulder in a way that exposes her neck without consciously thinking about it. None of these actions are planned. They're reactions, and that's what makes them reliable. Now here's the part most men miss. It's not just that she's touching her hair, it's the context around it. Is she doing it while maintaining eye contact with you? Does it happen more when you're speaking or when there's a moment of silence between you? Does it repeat itself throughout the interaction? These details matter because they tell you whether the behavior is random or connected to how she feels about you. Another important detail is the rhythm of the movement. Casual grooming tends to be quick and functional. She fixes it once and moves on. But attraction-driven behavior tends to linger. It repeats. It becomes slightly more fluid, almost absent-minded, as if she's not fully aware she's doing it. That difference is subtle, but once you see it, it becomes very clear. There's also a deeper layer to this that most men overlook. When she moves her hair in a way that reveals her neck, it's not just about comfort. The neck is one of the most vulnerable areas of the body. Exposing it, even slightly, is tied to trust and openness on a subconscious level. She's not making a conscious decision to show her neck. Her body is simply becoming less guarded in your presence. And that's the real signal. It's not about the hair itself. It's about what her body is starting to allow. So instead of jumping to conclusions the moment you see her touch her hair, take a step back and observe the pattern. Look at how often it happens, when it happens, and how it fits into the overall interaction. When those pieces come together, you'll start to see that what looks like a small, harmless gesture is actually one of the earliest signs that something is shifting beneath the surface. And once that shift begins, it usually doesn't stay isolated. It moves from the hair to something even more revealing. Once you understand what's happening with hair, the next signal becomes much easier to recognize, and it's significantly more revealing. That's when a woman starts touching her neck or collarbone. This is where the interaction begins to move beyond light, surface-level attraction, and into something more instinctive. Because unlike hair, which is always visible and easy to adjust, the neck is different. It's one of the most vulnerable areas of the body, both biologically and psychologically. From an evolutionary standpoint, the neck is exposed and unprotected. Major arteries sit just beneath the surface, which means the body naturally treats that area as something to guard. People don't casually expose or draw attention to their neck unless they feel a certain level of safety in their environment. So when a woman starts touching her neck while she's around you, something important is happening beneath the surface. She's not just fidgeting, she's reacting. In many cases, this shows up as a light movement of her fingers along the side of her neck or across her collarbone. Sometimes it's subtle, almost like she's absent-mindedly tracing the area. Other times, it's more noticeable, especially if it happens repeatedly during the interaction. The key, again, is not the movement itself, but the context. Is she doing it while she's engaged in the conversation with you? Does it happen when there's eye contact, or right after you say something that shifts the energy between you? Does it appear alongside other signals like relaxed posture or increased focus on you? When these elements align, the meaning becomes clearer. What you're seeing is a mix of two things happening at the same time. First, there's attraction. Second, there's vulnerability. Her body is responding to you, but it's also managing the emotional tension that comes with that response. Touching the neck becomes a way to release that tension, while also, in a subtle way, drawing your attention to that part of her body. And that's not accidental. Even if she's not consciously aware of it, her body is communicating openness. It's signaling that her guard is lowering, that she feels safe enough in your presence to allow a level of exposure that wouldn't normally happen. Now here's something most men misinterpret. They see this behavior and assume it's just nervousness or even discomfort. And while there is a nervous component to it, it's not the kind of nervousness that pushes someone away. It's the kind that shows emotional activation, the kind that happens when someone feels something they didn't fully expect. There's a difference between being uncomfortable and being affected. Uncomfortable creates distance. Being affected creates movement. And when a woman is touching her neck in a relaxed, fluid way while staying engaged with you, she's not trying to pull away. She's responding to the moment. Another detail to pay attention to is whether she combines this with exposure. For example, slightly tilting her head, brushing her hair aside, or holding her posture in a way that keeps her neck visible. These small adjustments often happen without conscious thought, but they reinforce the same signal. Her body is no longer closed, it's opening. And that opening is not something you force. It's something she allows when she feels comfortable enough. So when you see this happening, don't rush, don't overanalyze, and don't try to escalate aggressively. The value of this moment is not in what you do next, but in recognizing what it already means. Because once a woman reaches this point, her body doesn't stop communicating. It becomes even more direct. And the next signal shifts the focus to one of the most instinctively powerful areas of attention on the human face. Once a woman moves from touching her hair and neck into this next behavior, the signal becomes much more focused. She starts drawing attention to her lips. Now, this is one of the most powerful signals in the entire interaction, but it's also one of the easiest to misunderstand if you don't know what you're looking for. Because just like the earlier signs, the meaning is not in the action alone, but in how and when it happens. A woman might lightly touch her lips, press a finger against them, bite her lower lip, or slowly apply lip balm while she's interacting with you. On the surface, these actions can look casual, but when they happen in the right context, they carry a very specific message. She's directing your attention, and she's doing it instinctively. There's a biological reason behind this. Studies have shown that when men look at a woman's face, a significant portion of their attention is drawn to the lips, especially when there is contrast in color or movement. This is not something you consciously decide to do. It's part of how visual attraction works at a deeper level. Women, whether consciously or not, respond to that. So when she touches her lips while maintaining engagement with you, she's amplifying a signal that your brain is already wired to notice. She's highlighting one of the most sensitive and expressive areas of her face. But again, the key is context. If she applies lip balm quickly and moves on without any shift in her behavior, that's just routine. But if she does it slowly, while holding eye contact, or while listening closely to you, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes intentional, even if she's not fully aware of it. Another important detail is timing. Does she touch her lips when there's a pause in the conversation? Does it happen when the energy between you becomes slightly more intense? Does it repeat at different points throughout the interaction? These patterns tell you whether the behavior is random or connected to how she's feeling. There's also an emotional component here that most men overlook. Touching the lips is not just about drawing attention. It's also about managing internal tension. When a woman feels attracted, especially in a setting where she's still figuring things out, there's a mix of curiosity, excitement, and slight nervousness. The lips become an outlet for that energy. That's why the movement often looks subtle, almost thoughtful. Now here's where many men make a mistake. They either ignore the signal completely or they overreact to it. Ignoring it means missing a moment where her body is clearly communicating something. Overreacting means breaking the natural flow of the interaction by trying to force something forward too quickly. The correct approach is awareness. You recognize what's happening without changing your behavior drastically. You stay present, you stay engaged, and you allow the interaction to continue building naturally. Because at this stage, she's not just reacting to you anymore. She's starting to involve you in her attention. And that's a shift. Her focus is becoming more intentional, more directed, and more connected to you specifically. And as that connection builds, the signals start becoming even more revealing. Not just in how she touches herself, but in how she handles the objects around her. As the interaction builds and her attention becomes more focused on you, the next signal often shows up in a way that most men don't even recognize as attraction. She starts fidgeting. Not randomly, but in a very specific way. You'll notice her playing with her necklace, spinning a ring on her finger, adjusting her bracelet, or lightly tugging at her earrings while she's talking to you. On the surface, it can look like a simple habit, something she does without thinking. And in a way, that's true. But what matters is why it's happening in that moment. When a woman feels emotionally activated, whether it's excitement, curiosity, or attraction, her body doesn't stay still. There's an increase in internal energy, and that energy needs a physical outlet. Her hands start looking for something to do, something to regulate that feeling. And often that something is whatever is closest to her. Jewelry becomes a tool. This type of behavior is known in psychology as a form of self-soothing. It's how the body manages emotional intensity without drawing too much attention to it. Instead of expressing everything outwardly, she channels it into small, repetitive movements. Now here's the important part. When this behavior happens around you, and especially when it increases during your interaction, it's not random. It's a response to you. She's not fidgeting because she's bored. In fact, boredom usually leads to disengagement, looking away, checking her phone, or pulling out of the interaction entirely. This is different. She's still present, she's still engaged, but her body is dealing with a heightened emotional state. And that's where the meaning comes from. Another layer to this is where the jewelry sits. If she's playing with a necklace, especially one that rests near her collarbone or chest, she's not only managing her internal energy, she's also subtly drawing attention to that area. The same goes for rings and bracelets. The movement naturally pulls your eyes toward her hands, her wrists, and the way she's interacting with them. Again, none of this is planned. It's instinctive. Now here's where most men go wrong. They either don't notice it at all, or they assume it doesn't mean anything. Because it doesn't look like flirting in the obvious sense. There's no direct signal. No clear invitation, but that's exactly why it matters. Because the strongest signals are often the ones that don't look intentional. When a woman is consciously trying to impress, her behavior tends to be more controlled. But when she's genuinely affected, her body starts doing things automatically, and those automatic responses are much harder to fake. That's what you're seeing here. A natural reaction, a subtle increase in emotional energy, a physical outlet for something she hasn't put into words. So instead of ignoring it, start paying attention to the pattern. Does it happen more when you're speaking? Does it increase when the interaction becomes more personal? Does it appear alongside other signals like eye contact, relaxed posture, or focused attention? When those elements come together, it becomes clear that her behavior is not random. It's connected. And as that connection builds, something else begins to happen. She stops channeling that energy into objects and starts directing it toward you. Up to this point, everything we've talked about has been indirect. She's been touching herself, adjusting things around her, or channeling her energy into small movements that reveal how she feels without making it obvious. But when a woman moves from that to actually touching you, the entire dynamic changes. Because now it's no longer indirect, it's intentional. And this is the moment most men either completely miss or mishandle. When a woman reaches out and touches your arm during a conversation, places her hand on your shoulder, or lets her fingers brush against yours, she is crossing a social boundary. That kind of physical contact doesn't happen automatically. It requires a decision, even if it's a quick, subconscious one. She is choosing to create contact, and that choice carries meaning. Now, it's important to understand that not every touch is equal. A brief, accidental brush in a crowded space doesn't mean anything. But when the touch happens in a controlled setting, during a conversation, and especially when it's paired with eye contact or emotional engagement, it becomes something entirely different. It becomes a signal. What's happening here is both psychological and biological. When she touches you, she's not just expressing interest. She's also testing connection. Physical contact releases chemicals in the brain that increase feelings of trust and closeness. So, in a way, she's doing two things at once. She's showing you how she feels, and she's deepening that feeling at the same time. That's why this moment matters so much. Now here's where most men go wrong. They freeze. They don't react. They treat the moment like it didn't happen. Or worse, they become awkward, overthink it, and break the flow of the interaction. From her perspective, that feels like a disconnect. Imagine reaching out, creating a moment of contact, and getting nothing back. No acknowledgement, no shift in energy, no response. It feels like the signal didn't land. And when that happens, she often pulls back. Not because she lost interest, but because the connection wasn't matched. So the key here is not to overreact, but to respond naturally. If she touches your arm while laughing, you stay engaged. You smile, you maintain eye contact, you let the moment exist. If the interaction continues to build, you can mirror that energy in a subtle, appropriate way. Not to force anything, but to meet her where she is. Because attraction, when it's real, is not one-sided. It's a back and forth. Now here's something even more important. The quality of her touch tells you more than the touch itself. Is it quick and withdrawn immediately? Or does it linger just slightly longer than necessary? Does she repeat it at different moments? Does her body stay relaxed afterward, or does she reset and create distance? These details tell you whether the contact was casual or meaningful. Because when a woman is genuinely interested, her touch doesn't feel forced. It flows, it fits naturally into the interaction. And when that happens, it means the dynamic has shifted. You're no longer just someone she's interacting with. You're someone she's connecting with. And once that connection starts becoming physical, even in small ways, her behavior begins to change in another direction. She starts expressing that energy through the objects around her in a way that most men completely overlook. Now, this is one of the most overlooked signals, and at the same time, one of the most revealing, because it doesn't look like attraction at all. In fact, if you don't know what you're looking at, you'll assume it means nothing. But when a woman is emotionally engaged and attracted, and she hasn't fully expressed that energy toward you yet, she often redirects it somewhere else, into objects. You'll notice this most clearly when you're sitting across from her at a table, in a bar, a restaurant, or even a casual setting with something in front of her. Instead of just leaving things untouched, she begins interacting with them in a very specific way. She might slowly run her finger around the rim of a glass. She might trace the edge of a cup without even realizing it. She might slide her fingers up and down the stem of a drink, repeating the motion while staying focused on you. On the surface, it looks like nothing, but it's not random. It's controlled energy. What's happening here is that her body is experiencing attraction, but instead of directing that physical expression toward you directly, especially if the interaction hasn't reached that level yet, she channels it into something safe. The object becomes a substitute, a place where that energy can be expressed without crossing a boundary too quickly. This type of behavior has been observed in body language studies as a form of displacement. It's what happens when someone feels something internally, but redirects the expression outward in a more subtle way. And in this context, it's often tied to attraction. Now here's where it becomes important. Look at how she interacts with the object. Is the movement slow? Is it repetitive? Does it happen while she's maintaining eye contact with you or staying engaged in the conversation? If the answer is yes, then the behavior is not just a habit. It's connected to the interaction. Another layer to this is timing. Does it happen during moments where the energy between you feels slightly more intense? Does it appear when there's a pause, when neither of you is speaking, but the attention is still there? These are the moments where her body looks for an outlet, and instead of pulling away, she stays present, but expresses that energy through something else. Now here's the mistake most men make. They ignore it, because it doesn't look like flirting. There's no obvious signal, no direct action, nothing that clearly says, I'm interested. But that's exactly why it matters. Because the more subtle the behavior, the less controlled it usually is. And the less controlled it is, the more honest it becomes. So instead of brushing it off, start paying attention to these small details. They tell you what's happening beneath the surface. They show you that she's not just casually interacting with you. She's feeling something. And that feeling is looking for a way to express itself. Now, as that energy builds, and as her comfort continues to increase, her behavior starts shifting again. But this time, it's not about redirecting attention. It's about refining how she presents herself in front of you. At this stage, the interaction has already moved past casual interest. She's comfortable, she's engaged, and there's a clear level of attention being directed toward you. But now, something slightly different begins to happen. She starts adjusting herself, not in a random way, but in a way that's tied directly to how she's being seen by you. You might notice her smoothing out her clothes, straightening her top, adjusting her sleeves, fixing the way her outfit sits, or subtly repositioning herself in her seat. On the surface, it looks like simple self-maintenance, something people do all the time. But again, context is everything. If she was already doing this before you engaged with her, it doesn't mean much. But if these adjustments begin during your interaction, especially after she becomes aware of your attention, then it becomes something else entirely. It becomes presentation. What's happening here is rooted in a very old, very natural behavior pattern. When someone is attracted and emotionally engaged, they instinctively want to present the best version of themselves. Not in an exaggerated or artificial way, but in small, controlled adjustments that improve how they appear in that moment. It's not about perfection. It's about awareness. She becomes aware of how she looks in your eyes, and that awareness changes her behavior. Now here's where it gets more interesting. These adjustments often happen in response to your attention. If you look at her in a certain way, if the energy between you shifts slightly, or if the conversation becomes more personal, her body reacts by refining how she presents herself. She might sit up a little straighter. She might adjust her posture. She might smooth her clothing or reposition something that didn't need fixing a moment ago. These are not random actions. They are responses. And they indicate that your presence matters to her. Because people don't invest energy into how they're perceived unless the person in front of them is important to them in some way. Now here's the mistake most men make at this point. They either don't notice it at all, or they assume it's just a general habit. But if you look closely, you'll see that it's tied to the interaction itself. It happens when you're engaged. It happens when she's focused on you. It happens when the moment carries a little more weight. That's what separates it from normal behavior. Another important detail is the consistency. Does she adjust herself once and move on? Or does she make multiple small corrections throughout the interaction? When it repeats, it becomes a pattern. And that pattern tells you that she's actively aware of you, not just passively interacting. Now, this stage is important because it shows that her attention is no longer just internal. It's external. She's not only feeling something, she's responding to how she wants to be seen by you. And that's a clear shift. Because now, she's not just reacting to your presence, she's participating in it. She's shaping how the interaction looks and feels from her side. And once a woman reaches this point, there's one final signal that brings everything together. The one that most men misinterpret completely, even when it's happening right in front of them. There's one last behavior that brings everything together, and this is the one most men get completely wrong. Because on the surface, it looks like disinterest. When a woman rests her chin on her hand, gently cradles her face, or touches her cheek while looking at you, most men assume she's bored. They think she's losing focus, that she's just sitting there waiting for the conversation to end. But in many cases, the opposite is true. This behavior is known as facial framing. And when it shows up in the right context, it's one of the clearest signs that she's fully engaged with you. What she's doing is directing attention toward her face, her expressions, and her eyes. She's holding her own attention in place, and at the same time, holding yours. It's a quiet way of saying, "Stay here with me," without needing to say anything out loud. Now, again, context is everything. If she's avoiding eye contact, looking around the room, or disengaged from the interaction, then yes, she might be bored. But if she's maintaining eye contact, listening closely, smiling, and staying present while resting her chin on her hand, then what you're seeing is not boredom. It's focus, it's comfort, and more importantly, it's emotional presence. Because at this stage, she's no longer filtering everything she does. She's not thinking about every movement or trying to manage how she comes across. She's settled into the interaction. She's relaxed. And when someone is relaxed around you, their behavior becomes more honest. That's what makes this signal so important. It doesn't come from effort. It comes from comfort. And comfort, especially when combined with everything we've already covered, tells you that something real is happening. Now let's step back for a second and look at the full picture. From the beginning, her body was reacting before her words ever did. She touched her hair, her neck, her lips. She fidgeted with things around her. She made contact with you. She adjusted how she presented herself. And now she's sitting in front of you, fully present, fully engaged, without needing to hide anything. None of these signals required her to say a single word. And that's the point. Because attraction is not something women usually announce directly. They show it. Through patterns. Through behavior. Through small, consistent actions that reveal how they feel long before they're ready to say it. So from this point forward, the goal is not to overanalyze every single movement or assume that one signal means everything. The goal is to observe patterns, to understand context, and to recognize when multiple signals come together in a way that's consistent. That's when you know it's real. And when you do recognize it, don't freeze, don't second guess, and don't ignore it. Respond naturally, stay present, match the energy she's giving you. Because by the time you notice these signals, she's already moved closer. She's already showing interest. She's already giving you the opportunity to meet her halfway. And that's where most men either step up or miss the moment completely. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed any of these behaviors before, but didn't realize what they actually meant at the time? Drop your experience in the comments. I read them, and I respond to as many as I can. And if this gave you a new way of understanding attraction, make sure you subscribe. Because in the next video, I'm going to show you something even more important. What she actually expects you to do